Here we are with another bit of church and papal history in 10 minutes or less. Well, I ask you the question before we even get started, what is better than church history? Well, church history with the side of your favorite beverage, so bottoms up. Now, the history of the winemaking process goes back to time immemorial. Archaeologists have found remnants of wine from 9,000 years ago, and the production of wine could go back further than that. The invention of alcoholic beverages is one of those technologies that kind of gets skimmed over at times in the textbooks, but at the same time that humans were developing agriculture, metal tools, societal structures, and all the early inventions we associate with civilization, they were also inventing intoxicating beverages as well. Now, any number of ingredients can be used to make intoxicating beverages. Various types of grains, you could think of wheat, barley, corn, can be turned into beer, which people have been doing for many, many thousands of years. Honey, agave, apples, berries, and most importantly for us right now, grapes can be processed into a drink that contains alcohol. Now, I'm always fascinated where the ideas like this begin, and I have to imagine that the first person in an early community who somehow figured out how to turn a bunch of grapes or a pile of grain into something, some sort of drink that not only preserved these precious commodities, but also made you feel a little different, even good. That person must have been a very popular person indeed. People in the community probably thought that first brewer or vintner had magical, even godlike powers. World religions have always had a rocky and complicated relationship with alcohol throughout history. The Hittites, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all had gods of wine, beer, and the like. You have Bacchus and Dionysius in the Greco-Roman religion, and these were mystery cults which participated in ecstatic dancing, and wine-induced revelry was an integral part of that religious practice. These practices may or may not have influenced Jewish and later Christian practice in relation to wine. In the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, there's a really doozy of a story about wine and the effects of alcohol. Look up Genesis chapter 9 for yourself. But in short, Noah of the Ark fame just gets rip-roaring drunk and he passes out naked. His son, Ham, goes into Noah's tent to have a little chuckle at his dad's expense and winds up screwing everything for the people of Canaan for eternity who proceedeth from Ham. Even in Genesis, we get cautionary tales about not over-consuming alcohol. All throughout the Hebrew Bible, there's discussion of grain offerings and wine offerings, and it's a huge, huge part. And if anytime you crack your Old Testament, you're bound to find something about grain and wine. Go forward a few years and a few pages in your Bible, and you'll have the Last Supper of Jesus and his apostles. Jesus says that the wine he blessed and everyone drank was his blood. It wasn't an act of cannibalism. The first communion was a way that people could physically continue to commune or connect or have a relationship with Jesus from that point forward. In the early church, sacramental or communion wine had to be made of actual wine. It couldn't be grape juice or even some other alcoholic beverage, just pure red wine. At this point, Christianity did not have any prohibition against consuming alcohol. Sure, it was a sinful behavior to drink to excess, but doing almost anything to excess was considered a bad thing. Later on, Islam hit the scene and would completely prohibit alcohol, and any number of post-Reformation groups would develop strong temperance movements. Keep the idea of temperance and prohibition in the back of your mind. In the early church, it was the practice of all people, both laity and clergy, to take communion in both kinds, meaning consuming the wine and bread during communion, the body and blood, so to speak. In the Western Church, the practice evolved over many years where only the clergy took the wine at the Mass. There are a number of reasons for this, but that's a different story for a different day. So this is the next idea to keep in the back of your mind, is that it was not common for the lay person to take wine at communion. In some communities, they might take a tiny sip, but that was it, just a sip, equivalent to a spoonful or less. We are certainly not talking about every person having a few glasses, not even a glass equivalent. Now, as time went on, we find ourselves into the 20th century, the late 19th, early 20th century, and a movement of temperance or abstaining from alcohol was seeping through many post-Reformation Christian churches in the United States and in Northern Europe. By the year 1920, these Christian temperance supporters had the consumption, sale, and production of alcohol completely banned in the United States through the 18th Amendment to the Constitution and the Volstead Act, what we today call Prohibition. Now, a coalition of Jewish and Catholic groups were able to lobby and fight for there to be a religious exemption to these laws. What started off as an exemption to prohibition turned into the biggest loophole in prohibition. We often hear stories of illegal traders, also known as the bootleggers, such as Al Capone, making huge sums of money from trafficking in illegal booze. But there was a person who found a way to become fabulously wealthy and successful selling wine that was completely legal. Most of the famous wineries of the Napa Valley were ravaged by Prohibition. Their main cash crop was taken away from them, and they were forced to scramble to find anything else to plant. But that was not the case for one winery called Beaulieu. The owner, Georges de Latour, was able to procure exclusive contracts for selling sacramental wine to the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. While other wineries were destroying their vines and replacing them with other crops, de Latour and his winery were buying up all the grape crops they could in order to produce sacramental wine. Within less than a decade, Beaulieu Winery was producing almost 1 million gallons of completely legal wine for the religious community. Maybe all of that wine wasn't being used for exactly religious reasons, though. Remember, we said normally only priests took communion in both kinds, so much of that wine was being used for personal consumptions. But you know what? People wanted wine for personal consumption, and the shelf life of Prohibition was going to be incredibly short as far as laws and constitutional amendments go. By 1933, the 21st Amendment of the Constitution canceled out the 18th, and the wine could flow again. The Beaulieu winery was able to help the great wine-producing regions of the Napa Valley recover and is still in operation today. I hope you enjoyed this little piece of church history in 10 minutes. If you like the videos like this and full episodes of the history of the papacy, make sure you click the like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you get updated every time we publish an episode. I also want to thank all the supporters of the show on patreon.com/history of the papacy. They really helped this whole operation keep going, and you can be on the History of the Papacy diptychs list too as well. So that's a big bonus, but one way or the other, with that, I will see you next time.